And welcome to Adventures in Cataloging, Buckets, Baskets, Lists, and Carousels. I've included this webinar in kind of my cataloging series for the year, but it's not just for catalogers. So if you're in here and you're not a cataloger, don't worry that there's not really going to be anything for you. A lot of what we'll be talking about today will kind of focus on what catalogers can do with buckets, but I think buckets are most effective when they are used kind of communally. So, a lot of the different things that we'll be talking about today are the types of issues that people working the front desk might, or the circulation desk might sort of come across and need to bring to a cataloger's attention. And a bucket's a really good way to share records that need attention or items that need attention between those who come across them and those who would then do the editing work of them. So a lot of this is kind of communal in nature. And then also when we do talk about the OPAC and what patrons can do with their own lists and baskets, that's definitely something that frontline staff can do a lot with, because frontline staff are the ones who can teach patrons how to work with their baskets and lists. And then of course, carousels actually require admin privileges to make live, but anyone really has the ability to create a bucket that can be turned into a carousel. So once again, there's a lot of options for different permission levels working within the context of today's session. So if you are not a cataloger, don't worry. You don't need to be a cataloger to work with buckets, but we will be talking about some cataloging related functions within the context of buckets. So there's a little bit of something for everybody. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we will be talking about baskets. We'll be talking about buckets, item buckets and record buckets. We'll be talking about baskets and lists within the OPAC, and we'll be talking about carousels. And each of these are sort of different ways that you can group items together or materials together within Evergreen. And some of these are temporary, some of these are permanent, some of these are related to bibliographic records, some of these are related to item records. They cover a lot of different bases, but the thing that ties them all together is that it's all about grouping materials. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we do, I did want to go over a little bit of vocabulary, because some of it is kind of confusing in that a lot of it's very similar and almost feels interchangeable, but I wanted to make a few specific distinctions. A basket is a temporary list of bibliographic records. So it is very specifically bibliographic records. It is not copies or call numbers or anything like that. It is title records. An item bucket is a saved and therefore permanent list of individual copies. So this would be kind of at the barcode level. A record bucket is a saved and permanent list of bibliographic records. A list is a saved list of bibliographic records that are created by and visible to individual patrons. And a carousel is a saved list of bibliographic records that is created by staff but visible to patrons with a graphic interface. So as we're going through today, we'll be talking about each of these terms and using each of these terms. I just want to make sure that you understand the distinctions, particularly the idea that baskets are temporary and buckets are permanent until they're deleted. You can typically remove items from a bucket, but baskets will cease to exist once you log out of either the OPAC or the staff client. So let's start by talking about baskets. So baskets are most easily created from a catalog search, and that is what we're going to do today. Just most of you have probably done this in one respect or another. Basically, you conduct a catalog search. You check the boxes for any titles that you want to include in your basket. You can continue conducting more searches and checking more boxes. So, you can do one search, save a few things from it, and then do a completely different search. You can also navigate away from the catalog and go do other things in Evergreen, and then come back and still continue to add things to your basket. It's just that once you log out of Evergreen, that basket will disappear. So you can kind of use the basket throughout the day and, you know, work on different functions and things like that and come back to it, but you can't save it to continue working on tomorrow. So if you do need to save a basket that you've put together, you'd need to turn that basket into a bucket. A basket is useful for a couple of different things. You can place holds from it. So this is one of the things that, if you are working in a patron-facing desk, this action is particularly useful because you may have a patron come up and start asking you about different titles that you may have, or asking you how many books do you have on this topic. And so you do one search and then you do a different search. And as you go and you find titles useful to that patron, you can check them and put them in the basket. And then at the end, after you've conducted all the searches, after the patron feels like there's a lot for them to work with, you can go into that basket and then you can place holds. And so you can do sort of a single action to place holds on all of those saved titles. Or you could print or email title details. So, if these are primarily materials that you have available on your shelves, you could print that out and take the patron out to the stacks to actually find those materials. You could also email it to the patron so that they can kind of create their own list. Because, maybe they don't want all of these things at once. Maybe they want to kind of go through and check out just a few here and there at a time. And so they can kind of maintain that list. You can also turn your basket into a bucket. So, if this is a project that you need to work on continuously, or if the whole point of choosing materials from the catalog was to put them into a bucket, this is one of the easiest ways to get records into a bucket, is to create a basket and then add that basket into a bucket. And this is specifically for record buckets, which means that it's not going to work for items. You're not going to be able to put together an item bucket from a basket. But it is a useful way to develop a record bucket. And then you can also export records. So if you ever have a situation where you need to do, edits within MarcEdit or something like that, or there's some reason that you need to have actual MARC records outside of Evergreen to work with, you can export those and you can actually download a file of records to work with. All right. So before we talk about item buckets, let's take a look at some things we can do with baskets. So I'm going to come in here and just conduct a search in the catalog. So let's say you have a patron come up and ask for books about motorcycles. So you can conduct your search for motorcycles, and you can kind of check things that look interesting to the patron, that look like they might be useful. And as you go through, you'll notice that up here at the top, next to the basket icon, the number next to it increases. So this is the number of items in the basket so far. If I go and do a different search, so I started with motorcycles, but let's look for dirt bikes. I've conducted a new search. I still have 3 items in my basket. So that basket is still, has not been impacted by the fact that I've changed my search. So I can come down here, I can add a couple of titles from this search to my basket. And as I come back up, I see that now I've got 5 items in my basket. I can leave this interface. I can go to the splash page. I can, somebody maybe comes up to the desk and wants to check items out. I can conduct that circulation transaction, and then I can come back to my catalog, and I still have 5 items in my basket. Once I've decided that I want to work with that basket, I can do it directly from here by clicking on the basket actions menu, and then I have all of my different actions available. I can also go into the basket by clicking on the icon, and that gives me to the actual line item records for each of the materials that I saved. So I could come in here and I could place holds on just a few individual ones, just like I would from a regular search. I can go into the to the title records and take a look at them. And just like with my search results, I can navigate through those results and basically through the basket right here from the record itself. So I could go to the next one within my basket, and if I click this back to results, it'll bring me back to my basket. From the basket actions menu, I can go ahead and just place holds for all 5 of these. So I would do that, and it would take me into the regular place holds interface. So I could scan my patron's barcode, and then you'll see all 5 of these items are showing up down here for me to place those holds on. So once I place the hold, each of them will be essentially go into the hold targeter. I can also print. So if I do this, I'm just going to get a print um, pop-up that allows me to, make sure that I've got all the information that I want, and I can print that out. I can email it to the patron or to a colleague or myself. I can export the records. When I'm done, I can clear the basket, and then I can also add my basket to bucket. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'll select that. And at this point, I have the ability to add it to an existing bucket. So I can choose this drop down, and it tells me all of the existing buckets that I have. And so I could add this into here. Let's say I want all of these to be floating. So I'm going to put them in my float bucket so that I can go in and work on that. I could also create a new bucket. So all I would have to do that is create a name for my bucket, and I could add a description as well. Or I can add it to a shared bucket. So if I have the ID number of a bucket, I can just put this in here, and then I can add it to that bucket. And so this is really useful for that collaboration that I was talking about. So if, for example, you have a bucket for catalogers for items to merge, and a circulation staff notices when they're placing holds for patrons that there are a couple of different records that look like duplicates that are basically for the same thing. They can basically go into the shared bucket. They can create a basket for all of those duplicate items, and then they can put them into a shared bucket. So it doesn't have to be a bucket that Circulator owns. Instead of it's a bucket that is available to your entire department or your entire branch. And so they can put in the ID of that shared bucket, and then your catalogers can go into that shared bucket regularly and see these are all the potential duplicates, and then determine if they need to be merged, and then merge them directly from the bucket. So this shared bucket is a really useful feature. I'm going to go ahead and just create a new bucket for these. So I now have my motorcycles bucket. I'm not sure why I'd want that, but I have it if I want it. So I can now go into the cataloging menu into record buckets. And from my little bucket drop down button here, I can choose motorcycles. And now all 5 of those items are showing up in this bucket. And then I can work with them in batch, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's the basic process of baskets. It's fairly straightforward. It's fairly simple. My guess is that most people in this webinar have done something with a basket prior to this. The next thing we're going to talk about is item buckets. So we have been working with records up until this point. We looked at records when adding them to the baskets, and then we created record buckets from those items that were in the baskets. Item buckets are a little bit different. They are specifically related to individual copies. So where the record bucket is basically a list of TCNs and then the details about each TCN. An item bucket is a list of barcodes. So item buckets cannot be created from baskets, but there are a couple of different ways that you can populate an item bucket. So the most straightforward one is to just go directly to item buckets in the cataloging menu. And then within the pending items tab in there, you can just scan barcodes of all the items that you want in that bucket. And then once you've scanned everything, you just select all of your pending items and you add them to the bucket. However, if you have a list of barcodes, from a report you run or something like that, you can add that by uploading that file from the item status screen. So that's what I'm actually going to walk you through right now. So if I go into circulation and I go down here to item status, I have this option here that says choose file. I'm going to select that, and hold on a second while I remember where I saved my file. And it may take a few seconds to upload, but it'll upload that list. It's just a list of barcodes. That is all I have in that file. The file does need to be a CSV type, which if you run a report, that is one of your output options. So you can make sure that you are selecting that as your output option. And then you can, as long as the only thing in the report is the barcode, then you can upload that output directly into here. Now, if you do run a report that has more details than just the barcode, you can go into an Excel file, you can remove everything that's not a barcode, and then you can save that as a CSV file type. And so you still can then upload it, but you do have to make sure that what you are uploading is both a CSV and only barcodes. You don't want to have title information or shelving location or anything like that, only barcodes. But once I've done that, then I have within the item status grid here, it has uploaded every barcode, and then it's, of course, pulled all of the related information for each barcode here. So all of these items are now showing up within this grid, and I've got 47 of them. So that was a lot faster than scanning 47 individual barcodes. But of course, we're still just in item status. We need to get this into a bucket. So to do that, I'm going to select all, and I'm going to come over here to my actions menu, and I'm going to choose add to item bucket. Now I can also add to a record bucket at this point as well. So you have the ability to do both from this point, but in this case, I'm going to add to an item bucket. So I can either name a new bucket or I can create an existing bucket. I'm just going to put these into item bucket demo and then add to selected bucket. And now if we go into our cataloging menu and we come here to item buckets and we choose item bucket demo, then all of these 47 plus 2 that I had been messing around with prior to this webinar are showing up within this bucket. And so we were able to completely skip the pending items tab. Now, if I did want to add one more, I could come in here, I could scan a barcode into here and add it to my bucket this way as well. So you can do it both ways. You don't have to, it's not set in stone just because you uploaded that now that's what this bucket entails. You can always add more to it. You can also remove. So if I didn't want this one, I could select it and I could come up to the actions menu and I could remove selected items from bucket. Now, I may be the only one that has a problem with this, but make sure that you're choosing remove selected items from bucket and not delete selected items from catalog. Sometimes my eyes go straight to delete because I want to delete it from the bucket. Don't do that. Definitely remove. So fairly straightforward, and it's a nice way to just kind of very quickly build a bucket. I've heard that a future upgrade of Evergreen will have this ability to upload a file embedded directly into the bucket itself, but until that day comes, basically if you go through the item status, it's the same thing. You just have to do that extra step of taking all of those items from item status and putting them into the bucket. What can you do with an item bucket? Now that we've created this bucket, what can we do with it? We can place holds. We can edit item attributes. We can edit call numbers. We can transfer items to different call numbers. We can delete items and we can print labels. So from my bucket, I can come in here and let's say that I wanted to, that my library is doing a recall numbering project. And so our call numbers for juvenile fiction are no longer going to start with a J. Now they're going to start with JUV. So I could select everything from this bucket and I could come up here to my actions menu and I can choose edit call numbers. And this is going to pop me into my holdings editor where I have all of the items that I selected are showing up. And I have the ability to come up here to the batch actions and I can change my call number label. Actually, instead of doing J to JUV, let's add a prefix of JUV. And so I will do this in batch and I will just apply it. At least I will try to apply it. Oh, I have to set up a prefix for that. Um, let's see. So I can do this in batch for all of them. In this case, I think I'd probably want to go through individually. Um, and change my J's to JUV in here. But at the very least, they're all kind of within this same interface. So it's a lot faster than going into each individual item attribute. I can also, change my owning library. I can come in here and I can change the barcodes, and that's another thing that this can be useful for. If you have a barcoding project, you can do that in here as well. So if I'm doing a thing where I'm adding item numbers, if I'm doing a thing where I want to start using monograph parts, then I can do a lot of that from this interface. So that is how I can use item buckets to update call numbers. But let's take a look at using item buckets to update item attributes. So I'm going to do the same thing where I've selected all of these, and then I'm going to go into edit selected items from my actions menu. Now, a lot of catalogers, of course, unify their holdings editor. So you look at the holdings interface and the item attributes together. I've separated them for the purposes of this demonstration. So you do see sort of call number and item attributes as two separate actions. But the reality is that if you have unified those, and even if you haven't, you can go between tabs. If you've chosen call number, you can edit item attributes. If you've chosen to edit the item, you can go back and change the call number. So both of those are going to be available from this point. It doesn't matter which one of those two you selected from the actions menu. But when you edit item attributes in batch like this, you'll see that basically you're seeing every single item from that bucket. I don't recommend doing 49 different items at once. I would recommend probably, maybe 5 or 10. Figure out what your comfort level is. But this is a lot to do at once, but you can do it. And you're going to see, this is how it'll appear. Each item attribute will appear in one box. You'll get a list of every single item. And then in some cases, 35 of my items are currently available. And so I have one line for available with this indicator of how many copies are within that status. But at this point, I can make changes here. So let's say I'm changing all of my shelving locations from juvenile fiction to juvenile fiction paperback. That's adult. And so I would apply that. And so now that shelving location is going to show up for everything. I'll come down here and apply all and save. It may take a moment because it's 48 copies. And then if I come back into my item bucket and I refresh it, now my location for every single one of these is juvenile fiction paperback. So if you're ever doing that type of project where you are reshelving things, you're moving things from one section to another. This is also useful if you have displays or if you have, new fiction that you, after 6 months, you move it out to be in the regular stacks or something like that. This is a quick way to change that shelving location for everything. You can make other changes as well. Of course, you can change things like circ modifiers and whether something circulates and whether you want to have a short duration period or a normal duration period. Any item attribute that you can do normally, you can do in batch. Some of them I'd recommend avoiding, things like alerts and stuff like that. I would recommend probably not doing in batch, but you can do just about anything that you would be able to do normally, you can do from a bucket in batch. So that's one of the big uses of an item bucket. But you can also transfer items to different call numbers. And this is something that, or let's talk about holds real quick first, actually. So we saw how to place holds on records. So record level holds, title level holds from a basket. Let's look at how we could do a copy level hold from an item bucket. So let's say I have a patron who wants all of these. Or more likely, maybe my cataloging department wants to reprocess and relabel everything. And so we're placing holds for ourselves. I can, especially if we have changed all the call numbers in the shelving locations, I can select all of them. I can come into my actions menu and I can choose request selected items. Now this is going to default me to copy holds. I can change it to a title hold, so it puts the hold on the bibliographic record rather than the copy. That is an option. In this case, I'm going to keep it as a title hold. And then it's going to automatically place it for me because I'm logged in. But of course, we don't place holds on our staff login accounts. So I would change this to whatever staff patron account would need to place this hold, whether it's, my cataloging department or my youth services department or an individual staff member. And then I can set my pickup library as well. And then I just hit OK. And these holds might not actually go through because it's probably beyond the threshold. Oh, no, it looks like I got all of them. So that's great. That's how you place holds. It's fairly straightforward. We talked about changing item attributes and changing call numbers. Let's talk about transferring to new call numbers. Now, those of you who are item catalogers, this may be something that you are familiar with. It is not necessarily something that an item bucket is the easiest way to do it from. Frankly, I think it's a lot easier to do it from the holdings view within a record, but it is certainly possible to do it from an item bucket. So basically, the first thing you need to do is navigate to the bib record for the item you want to transfer. In the holdings view tab, select the call number you want to transfer items to, and then from the bucket, you can select all items to be transferred. So this is maybe easy if you have, a select list of items that you're trying to transfer. It's easier to see it from the bucket. But you have to go into that holdings view tab anyway, so I don't necessarily feel like it's much easier to do it from the bucket. But let's go ahead and do that briefly. I'm going to leave this up here. And then let's just go into one of these items. And I'm going to go into the title record for it. And then under holdings view, I am going to choose a call number that I'd like to move everything to. So this can be useful, if you are moving a lot of things, maybe even between branches. This can be a useful way to do that. This is taking a little while to load. All right, here we go. So I would come in here and I would choose the specific call number that I want all of my copies to be attached to. And I would go up here to my actions menu and I would mark library call number as transfer destination. And then from here, I can select the specific copy that I'd like to move. And I can transfer selected items to marked call number. And so if I go back into this, you'll see that it is now at Alexander, Maine. I don't remember where it was before, but it is now at Alexander, Maine. And that is the call number that I just moved it to. I believe it must have been at most likely Braswell before. So let's come back into my bucket. So that is the process of transferring to new call numbers. And then the final thing I wanted to show you from within here is deleting items. So just be aware, just like with anything else where you're deleting, if you delete the last copy attached to a bib record, then that record will be deleted too. So just make sure that if you're going to be batch deleting, that you're aware of anything that may be the last item on a record. If it's the last item and you're just getting rid of it and that's the end of it, that's okay. But if you plan to replace the item, and so you're deleting something that was damaged or that is just no longer good a good volume of that to be circulated. Um, don't delete it until you've replaced it, just because if you delete it and and it's the last one, then that bib record's going to go away as well, and then you have to create a new bib record. So I would just recommend just double checking. Even if when you made the bucket, it was not the last item, it's possible it's become the last item since then. So just double check. And deleting is fairly straightforward, just like just about everything else we've done. So I'm just going to select a few of these, and I'm going to come up here to the Actions menu, and I'm going to delete selected items from catalog. And so they're still showing up in my bucket here, but if I come over here to my grid manager and I choose is deleted, then I get this extra column here for whether or not a copy is deleted. And I see these first three, which are the three I selected. They are marked yes here. So I still have them in my bucket. I have this record that that deletion happened, but they are marked as deleted over here. So that helps me keep track of things. And once I feel like, I've noted that and I'm comfortable moving on, then I can come up here and I can remove those from my bucket. So that is everything that I had about item buckets. Are there any questions so far? We're about halfway through. Does anybody have any questions about item buckets? Let's see, it looks like there's something in here. So Cheryl from Bunkum says that they use this regularly to change shelving locations, and I think that's probably one of the best uses of an item bucket. It's a very convenient way to very quickly change shelving locations. So highly recommend. All right, well, let's get into record buckets. So if item buckets allow you to edit individual copies, record buckets allow you to make changes to bibliographic records. Now, I would caution you against going really deep into making changes to the actual MARC record itself. The option is there and we will talk about it, but it's something that I would really recommend being very cautious with. But in addition to editing multiple records at once, you can also delete records. Generally, this isn't something you'll need to do because you cannot delete a record if there are copies attached to it. And if you remove copies, that should automatically delete the record. There are situations where sometimes something will linger, even though it should have been deleted. And so this is a good way that you can sort of delete those lingering records. Transferring title holds is kind of an interesting thing that you can do with a record bucket. The number one thing that I would say a record bucket is useful for is for merging duplicate records. And then, of course, just like we talked about with baskets, you can also export MARC files from a bucket. So before we get into any of those actions, let's talk about another way that you can add records to a bucket. So we talked about doing a catalog search and then adding items to a basket and turning that basket into a bucket. Another thing you can do is a record query. So directly from the record bucket interface, you can do a search of the catalog. It does take a little bit more of like knowledge of Boolean operators and things like that, but you can basically do a search for specific fields, and you can even limit that down to your library with the identifier site and then your branch short name. And in basically doing that, we'll do a catalog search within the context of the bucket, and then it's very easy to add to the bucket. So let's try that. We're going to come in here to our cataloging menu and choose record buckets. And I'm going to come over here to the record query. And I am going to start with a search for, let's see, we can do a search for subject. And let's look for turtles. So I've got a search for subject turtles, and let's look for it specifically at pack. Now, I will let you know that if you are doing this site search within it, you do need to make sure that you're putting your branch name in all caps, and it needs to match what you see up here in your top right-hand corner. It doesn't have to be the same branch as this one, but it needs to be basically whatever that would be. So it needs to be your library short name. And for a lot of libraries, that's fairly straightforward. But, for Holcutt Ellington Memorial Library, it's Holcutt Ellington. You know, a lot of those longer library names are going to be shortened down to just something very short and specific. So make sure you know your library short name before you put it in here. Otherwise, it won't work. I tried it a lot of different ways, and it only works if it's formatted exactly correctly. So let's do this search. And so I get basically the results of a search for turtles at this particular library. So then I can take these items. I could take maybe just a few of them. I could take all of them by clicking this top button. And I can add them to a bucket. I think I have to select my bucket first. So let's come down here and we'll just put them in the motorcycles bucket. So now this is motorcycles and turtles. And we'll add them to the bucket. And so now our bucket has gone from 5 items in it up to 8. So just kind of an easy way to look for items that you may need to add to a bucket directly from here without having to go through the catalog search itself. From here, you can do batch edits. So you would select the titles that you want to edit. You would click on the batch edit button, and then you would basically determine what types of edits you want to make and do them from there. So let's try this briefly. Once again, I really caution you against getting too wild with this, but it can be useful for certain types of things. So we're going to do a batch edit. And this brings you into this interface. You may or may not be familiar with it. Basically, you have 3 options. You can replace. So you can basically say, if I have a, 490A, I would like to replace whatever in that subfield with a new value. You can add. So you can say, regardless of whether I have a 490A, I'd like to add one. Or you can delete. You can say, I'm going to remove all my 490As. So you would come in here. You would put in the tag for the field that you are either replacing, adding, or deleting. You would put in your subfields. And then as you're doing this, you see the marked data field will fill in automatically with the correct formatting based on what you've put up here. And then you can come in here and you can actually add whatever you'd like to, in this case, replace with. So you would do that. And so you can see over here in your merge template preview, this is what that field is going to look like now. If you don't want it to look like that, then you probably shouldn't be doing this within a batch edit. Obviously, this would be a very bad edit to make in my case. None of these are in a series. None of these are related to one another, and that series is certainly not named Turtle Power, and I also don't think I formatted it correctly. But I could do this, and so it was successful. It has in all 8 of those records in that bucket, they now have a 490A of Turtle Power. So if we come back into my bucket and we go into the record itself, and we come down here to my mark view, it now says 490A Turtle Power. And I promise this is a next, so this has not actually messed up any of your real records. But you can see what is possible from this batch edit option. Let's see. So deleting records. I think I've got a good bucket for this in here. This is another good one to have sort of a rotating bucket that people can add to over time. If somebody comes across a record that has no items attached to it, so therefore should have been deleted, but for some reason wasn't, they can add it to this bucket, and then a cataloger can just come through every, once a week or something like that and clear it out. So if I come into a bucket of records to delete, once again, you see I have this deleted column. So items will show up in here even if they have been deleted. This is really useful for any record where you, or any bucket that you are going to be using for deletions, because it allows you to double check that the deletion actually went through. And then of course, in this case, if something has already been deleted, that you can see that and you can remove it from your bucket. And so just like with the item bucket, you can remove from the bucket from the actions menu. Choose a different bucket. All right, so I can come into this bucket and select items to delete, and I can select all of them and come up to the actions menu and choose select delete selected records from catalog. And I'll get a sort of a "are you sure about this" pop-up. And then anything that couldn't be deleted, I will get a notification about. So in this case, none of these items, all of these items had volumes attached, so none of them could be deleted. So you can see the deleted field still says no. And I don't have anything that, because records are deleted automatically upon the last volume being removed, I don't have any records that are in a state to be deleted. But that's what the process looks like. Transferring title holds is kind of an interesting one. So I want to show you that before we get into merging. Transferring title holds is basically a way, if you have a situation where a bunch of holds have been placed on one record and they really need to be placed on another record, you can change all of them to the correct record without having to like cancel each one individually and then place it back on the correct record. So this might happen if you have a situation where, maybe you find out that a DVD was miscatalogued as a Blu-ray and you have a bunch of holds on it for people who, wanted a hold on a DVD, but it turns out that the item itself, the only item on this record itself is a Blu-ray. And so you want to switch it over to a different record that is truly a DVD record. Or if you have a situation where there's a hopeless hold, the only copy attached to a particular record is never going to get is missing or something like that. So you have all of these holds on it and there happens to be another record that has available copies. You want to take all of those holds and move them in batch to the other record. So basically, if holds have been placed on a title that for whatever reason is not going to fulfill those holds as required or requested, then you can transfer those requests. So you would want to do this similarly to how you mark items to move to a different bib record. So you'd navigate to the correct record, you would mark for title hold transfer, and then from the record bucket, you'd select the titles that you want to transfer. You'd transfer those title holds from the action menu, and then they would show up on the different record. So let's come in here to actually, I think this is the one I want. So we're going to come in here to this first one, the Witching Tide, and I'm going to open it up in the record itself. And so so it does have one hold on it right now. And let's say for whatever reason, I don't want this hold to come through on this particular record. I want it to come through on a different record. I would come up here and I would find the correct one. So this is for the book. I'm going to switch it over to the CD audiobook. We are still, I think, trying to re-ingest all of the records in Next, and I'm still not getting quite the results I want from my searches. We'll just switch it to this one. So I'll come in here to Dangerous Tides, and I'll come up here to Mark For, and I'll choose Title Hold Transfer. Then from my record bucket, I'll select this title. I'll come up here to my Actions menu, and I'll transfer my title holds. So if I come back into Dangerous Tides, and I come into View Holds, that hold that was on Witching Tide before, is now on dangerous tides. So it just moved it from one record to another. If I'd had 15 holds on Witching Tide and done this, all 15 of those would show up on here. Now you can do it individually from a patron's record if you have only just one specific hold that needs to be moved. But if you have a situation where you really do need to move in batch a bunch of holds, this is a good way to do that. All right, so we're going to talk about merging, but before we do that, are there any questions about what I've looked at so far? Oh, and Benjamin pointed out that bibs with no items or 856 fields are also automatically deleted after 4 months. So once again, for the most part, you shouldn't have to do a lot of manual deletion of bib records. Okay, well, let's talk about merging because I think this is the number one thing that record buckets are really useful for. Close out these extra tabs and we are going to come into my bibs to merge bucket. And this is something that I recommend that your library has is a bibs to merge bucket. That way, anyone who comes across bibliographic records that they believe are duplicates can put them in here. And then your bib cataloger can take a look at that whenever they have a chance. And they can merge things as needed. And so that's just a good way to kind of catch these duplicates throughout the year. So in this case, I have a bunch of different records that are all the same title. If I come over here under author, I can see that some of these have different authors and some of these have the same author. So I am going to go ahead and remove those that are not Colleen Hoover. So I'm going to remove those records from this bucket. And then that leaves me with these 4. So to merge these records, I would select them and I would come up here to my actions menu and I would choose merge selected records. Now, generally speaking, I would recommend that you don't attempt to look at and merge more than 4 at a time. This is about as much as I think is readable. In fact, I think 4 is really pushing it, frankly. But basically, what you're able to do from this point is you're able to compare the records themselves, determine whether they're truly duplicates. So I'm going to do that first. I see right off the bat that this one here is large print, so I don't want to merge that one. So I am going to remove this one from consideration by clicking this button. And now I'm down to just 3. Oh, this one is large print as well, this center one. So I'm going to remove the center one as well. So that leaves me with just these 2. So once I've removed any that don't appear to be duplicates, then I would compare the records and I would determine which one's better. I'm going to go here with this one on the left. It has significantly more 650s. It has, I guess the 520 is about the same, but it has more fields overall. It looks like it's generally, yeah, this one, the 260 says place of publication not identified. A lot of reasons that I'm going to stick with this one here on the left. So I'm going to select this one as my lead record. I can edit it from here. So if I really like this one, but there's something that I really like over here in the right record and I want to make sure that it's included, I could come in here and let's take this Family Secrets 650. I'm going to copy that. And then in my left-hand record, I'm going to click Edit. And I get my little enhanced mark editor. I can also switch to the flat text editor. And I can, oh, it looks like Family Secrets is already in here. So I'm not actually going to add that. But I can add whatever I liked from the right-hand record here into the left. Once I feel confident that this is as good as it's going to get, then I can click the merge button. And it might take a second. Hmm. It's the large print.
maybe just refresh that bucket?
I tried refreshing the bucket and nothing's different except that it's now not showing me any of my fields. All right, I'm just gonna try it again. Maybe I clicked it too fast. Oh, no, I had my merge profile set to match only merge. You do want to make sure that you have a merge profile set, but that is by default it's going to sit here on match only merge. So that should have worked. Let me try one more time. There we go. I don't know why it didn't work the first time. But it will, when the merge is complete, it will automatically pop you into the newly merged record. And then you can come in here to record notes and you can see that the record, the other record was merged onto this record on this date. So you have that kind of, that record of the record merge. So that is the process of merging. It is relatively straightforward. If I refresh my bucket now, you'll see that this last one here is deleted yes, because it merged this one onto, I guess, the second one here, and then deleted basically the empty one. So that's another kind of after the merge to check for. I'm not sure why these are not populating.
If you go to the URL and hit enter again,
Gonna blame it on the upgrade because that's what I'm
Ooh.
doing this month. But that's the process of marching. Are there any questions about that process? All right. Well, let's talk briefly. I'm going to skip over creating a bucket from a queue. It's fairly straightforward. But let's talk about the OPAC because I did want to look at the basket and list options for patrons, and I wanted to make sure we got to carousels as well. So we are going to just pop into the OPAC, and I'm going to log in as a patron. And patrons have the option also to create baskets and then to create lists, which are essentially just buckets, but they are called lists in the OPAC. So logged in as a patron, I can go view my current lists here in the My Lists tab. And so I can see any of the lists that I've created, and I can go into it and I can see the books that have been added to that list. I can also add things to the list in a similar way to how I did a basket to bucket action within the staff client. So I would conduct a search, and when I find an item that I like, I can select it, and that's going to add it to my basket. And from basket actions, I can add basket to saved list. I could also add it directly to my list from the search interface here. So I could just come right over here to add to my list and put it directly onto one of my existing lists or add to a new list. So let's do that. I'll add to a new list. And I can determine whether or not I want to share my list. I can also determine whether I want to add anything that's in my basket to this list as well. I'm not going to do either of those things. I'm just going to click submit. And so now if I go into that list, I now have my new list. And if I click on it, I now have the title that I selected from that search in it. So that's the basics of creating a list and adding to a list. The options that a patron would have from this point, they can share the list, so they can actually make this viewable. They get a little link and they can send that link to anybody. They could download it as a CSV, so they could download it and then print it out or something like that. They can also make it their default list so that this is where anytime they add something to a list, if they don't choose a list, this is the list it'll go on to. For the within the list itself, for each individual action or item, you can do an action on it from this menu where you could place a hold, you could print it, you can email it, and then of course you can move it around, you can remove it or add it to a different list. So if I wanted to place a hold on this, I can place sort of batch holds just like I did from the staff client. If I have multiple items on a list, I can place holds on all of them. Um, and then I just come in here and it's the same hold interface that I would work with as a patron normally. Um, so that there's not a ton to patron lists, but it's nice to know that that's an option, and it's good to be able to walk your patrons through that if they're interested. So we created lists. Adding to a list from a basket, we kind of looked at that, but basically from your basket actions up here at the top, you just add basket to saved list. And then you can choose the list that you'd like to add it to. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about, and we only have 4 minutes left, but I did want to make sure that I brought up carousels. Just something for those of you who have not worked with carousels before, there are 4 basic out of the box types of carousels, and then there's also a manual type. So you can create carousels for newly cataloged items, recently returned items, top circulated titles, and newest items by shelving location. But you can also create sort of your own parameters for what a carousel should contain. And this is something that you do have to be an administrator to do. But one thing that you can do that makes this especially customizable is that you can create a bucket and turn that bucket into a carousel. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today because carousels really just are buckets. When a carousel is created, a corresponding record bucket is also created. That bucket's going to be owned by the staff user who created the carousel. And then if the bucket is removed, or if the carousel is deleted, then the bucket will be removed. So a carousel really is just a bucket. It just has this graphical interface that shows up on your OPAC. And so it just has this extra element. And because a carousel is just a bucket can be easily made into a carousel. We're going to skip over creating carousels manually, and we're going to go straight into creating a carousel from a bucket. You can do this from either an item or a record bucket. So you can put together a record bucket or an item bucket based on titles that you want to put on a carousel. You know, if you wanted to have a special holiday themed carousel or a carousel of materials from a special sub collection or something like that. You can just create a bucket of those materials and then you can create that carousel directly from the bucket. It's fairly straightforward. So we're going to go back into our staff client. And I'm going to come up here to my record buckets. Actually, let's do this from the item buckets and I'll use that big bucket I created earlier. So basically I can come into here. I can select everything within this item bucket and from my actions menu. Oh, I guess I do have to do it from record buckets. That's what I thought, but I read something earlier that said I could do it from item buckets. All right, we're going to come back in here to our item bucket demo. All right. So I can come in here and I can select all of the records within my bucket. And then from the buckets menu, I choose create carousel from bucket. I name my carousel. And I create carousel. And this is going to pop me into the administration menu for my carousel. It's automatically owned by wherever I'm logged into, wherever my workstation is. So I will probably want to come in here. I have to double click to open it, I think. And I want to change my my owner from my branch to my system. And then I can make other changes as well. I can change the name. I can also add additional items. Right now, the maximum item on it is 5 because that's what I had in my bucket. I can increase this if I want to add additional items. I can also add specific branches whose items can be included in this bucket and specific shelving locations if I wanted to do that. But because it's from a very specific list, I don't necessarily need to do that. Then I save it. And then it's going to be visible now on the OPAC. So if I come in here, I may have misspelled that. All right. Rather than watching me bumble around trying to get the right next OPAC to show up, I'm going to say that it is 301. And so we are going to go ahead and call this. I hope this was useful. I hope that, especially if you have been a little nervous to work with buckets before, this has given you some ideas of what's available within buckets. I'm happy to hang around for a little while longer if people do have questions. And then, of course, as usual, I'll post this recording to Basecamp. But if you have questions about it that you think of later and you'd like to put them on Basecamp, I'm happy to answer those questions there as well. I don't see any questions in chat, but if you do have some questions, feel free to either unmute yourself or go ahead and put them in chat, and I'm happy to answer them now. Well, I appreciate everyone being here today. Google waited until the very end to fail on me. So I appreciate everyone being here today. I do hope that if you have questions moving forward, that you bring them my way. I'm happy to answer any questions even after the fact. And otherwise, I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Samantha.